How would you like a 15% discount to my daily email, the stack of stuff, the show notes, discounts to the conference, all of that? All you need to do is text the word show to 33777. You'll get the annual subscription with a 15% discount to my daily email. You'll get the stack of stuff, the links to the show notes, discounts to the conference, and so much more. All you have to do is text the word show, SHOW, to 33777. Text show to 33777.
Welcome to the Eric Erickson Show podcast, Hour 2.
Hello, America. Welcome. Across the fruited plain, it is Eric Erickson here on my show. The phone number is 877-973-7425. I am delighted to have you with me. Phone lines are open. Be patient with me if you're on the phone. I want to call your attention to the show notes today. In fact, if you text the word data to 33777, in addition to being able to pre-order my book, if you follow the very first link, you'll be able to get a discount to the daily show notes. Now, in a situation like this, it's kind of important because if you subscribe to the show notes that came out as the show started, you would see a profile. We were able to get a circle through the firewall for you, or the paywall for you, a profile of the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Mike Johnson, called Accidental Speaker. It's in The Atlantic. I want to spend a moment on this because I want to give you some background here that I think should, to some degree, I guess, shape you in your views of the speaker. You may think he's a squish, but just follow along with me here. Speaker Johnson's earliest intimations of a political philosophy were anchored in the fact of his existence. Friends of Jean Messina had urged her to consider an abortion. She and Pat Johnson were only in high school, both of humble circumstances in South Shreveport, Louisiana, but instead they got married and they welcomed James Michael in January of 1972. 3 more children followed. Exactly 1 year before Roe v. Wade, my parents, who were just teenagers at the time, chose life, Mike Johnson said at the annual March for Life rally earlier this year. And I'm very profoundly grateful that they did. In all things, God works for the good of those who love him. This Mike Johnson was taught to trust. And he has to trust this because how else could he have made sense of the events of September 17th, 1984? On that afternoon, his father, an assistant chief of the Shreveport Fire Department, was summoned to the Dixie Cold Storage Plant on the report of an ammonia leak. In rubberized suits, he and his partner ventured into one of the vaults to locate and cap the valve. Their flashlights barely cutting through the dark. Then an explosion, screams, both men on fire, everything around them on fire, Pat Johnson's suit and then flesh melting off his body as he squeezed through a hole in the wall, later estimated to be no more than 12 inches square. His partner died 2 days later in the hospital. Pat, with burns covering more than 72% of his body, clung improbably to life. The family prayed, Jean playing tapes of the Psalms at her husband's bedside. 10 days into his stay involving more than 3 dozen surgeries, Pat was finally able to speak. Pat told me today he would make it, Jean recorded in her diary, according to a 1987 book about the explosion and its aftermath. I asked him how he knew, and he said, the Lord. I was 12 years old and I watched them, Johnson told me. Faith was not some ethereal concept. We prayed and we believed, and it happened. In some ways, his childhood ended with the fire. His mother regularly spent nights in the hospital waiting room, only returning home at the coaxing of doctors. Mike had to take care of his 3 siblings. His role of man of the house became necessarily more literal when his father, not long after the accident, left the family in search of purpose in drier climates, remarrying and divorcing several times. Out of this crucible, emerged an uncommonly serious and diligent teenager, the class president and key club officer and speech trophy winner. At Louisiana State University, the Interfraternity Council president didn't drink, one Kappa Sigma brother recalls, but he never seemed to look down on those who did. I have met Mike Johnson. I like Mike Johnson. Mike Johnson is the dog that caught the car and has been running him over ever since. Here's my frustration with the conservative movement right now. Let's take the piece I wrote in National Review today. A number of conservative organizations have decided conservatism no longer works. And instead of saying, hey, we tap out, they're saying, no, we're going to rebrand conservatism. And conservatism is going to look like 1950s liberalism. We're going to support unionization. We're going to support government industrial policy. We're going to support command and control economics. We're going to support unionization of the private sector. We're going to support higher wages mandated by the government. We're going to support a larger social safety net. We're going to do all these things. We've decided that the federal government should condition society in a just way that looks like us. And the problem with this approach is that you're not going to hold on to power. So when you decide that you want a government that can justly order society, when the left takes power, their justly ordered society is going to look a lot different from yours. The best way to reorder society is to cut the federal government and allow people at the local level to decide for themselves. And if you don't like it, you can move. Federalism works. But there's a group at the national level, there are the now national conservative populists, the bull moosers and the like. They've decided they want to impose their will and their vision of society through government, and they can't keep it up because at some point they will lose power. And part of it right now is they don't have power and they're grasping for something to hold on to, and they think if only we could be in charge of the federal government, we could chart our vision forward. But look what's happening to the country after Roe v. Wade. A lot of Americans are adopting abortion. Are you going to one size fits all impose it on them now? You're going to get rid of transgenderism. You're going to reimpose traditional marriage, ban gay marriage. You're going to be socially conservative, except you're all becoming fiscally liberal. The problem is you're going to lose power at some point. But you've given up on the tried and the true. You've given up on the things that work. You've given up on trying to rein in the government. And so instead of abandoning the institutions that you're now in charge of, you're trying to redefine the institutions and their purpose to suit your needs, not the needs of the country. You got to justify your existence and your ideas that are no longer conservative. Concurrently, the conservative movement has lost its ability to have grace. Look at Mike Johnson. He is the first movement conservative Speaker of the House. He's the first. No, Newt Gingrich was not a movement conservative. In fact, when the coup came in 98 against Gingrich, it was the conservatives trying to oust him. Gingrich backed a number of moderate candidates around the country. He spoke a very good conservative game, and he fought for some very good conservative principles, but Gingrich was not a movement conservative guy. The movement conservatives loved him, but he really wasn't one of them. He was a college professor. But Gingrich was more conservative than what came after him. He was way more conservative than the kid toucher Denny Hastert, who was more conservative than John Boehner, although Boehner was one of the ones I think who tried to participate in ousting Gingrich at the time. Paul Ryan on fiscal issues was more conservative than Gingrich, but was vilified by the right because he was too moderate in other approaches. Then you had Kevin McCarthy, who's an opportunist. Now you got Mike Johnson. Mike Johnson is a pro-life, movement conservative evangelical Christian, the first pro-life, movement conservative evangelical Christian to ever in the history of this republic be Speaker of the House. He has a 2-seat majority. Conservatives can't get what they want from him because he has a 2-seat majority. So what's their solution? We need to get rid of him. It's like these conservative institutions in D.C., they can't advance their conservative agenda right now, given the dynamic in Washington. So they've decided, let's give up the conservative agenda and do something we can get through. They're co-opting Elizabeth Warren. They're working with Elizabeth Warren, for God's sakes. They're working with Lena Khan, a communist in charge of the FTC, because they don't want conservatism. They want to get something done. They want to feel like they're putting points on the board. And so they'll abandon convictions to put points on the board. Mike Johnson can't put points on the board for conservatives right now because you've got a 2-seat majority and the moderates outnumber the conservatives. That's the reality. And if you don't believe me, believe Donald Trump, who's come out now and defended Mike Johnson. Donald Trump has thrown Mike Johnson a lifeline, saying Johnson is more conservative than what he's able to accomplish because of his 2-seat majority. Exactly what I've been telling you. Donald Trump and I agree on something. It's notable Steve Bannon came out this weekend and said Johnson needs to be ousted, and today is trying to spin Trump, saying, well, this isn't what really Donald Trump means. It's the squishes and the establishment guys in his payroll who are telling him to say this, but he doesn't really mean it. He's really furious with Mike Johnson. Well, he could have told us that, but he didn't. It's funny how all of these people speak for, it's like the Oracle of Delphi. The Oracle of Delphi would give some prophecy and people would interpret what the Oracle of Delphi meant. Donald Trump comes out and clearly says Mike Johnson's a good guy who is conservative, but has a 2-seat majority, and because of that, he can't get stuff done. Then you got the Steve Bannon's world saying, oh, he doesn't really mean it. This is what he means. Maybe we should take Trump at his word. The conservative movement has gotten impatient. It is impatience given the size and scope of federal government that is deserved, but it's an impatience not grounded in the reality of a 2-seat majority in the House, no control of the Senate, and no control of the White House. What the hell do you expect to accomplish? If you try, conservatives, to shut down the government, and I have never opposed a government shutdown in my life, I think they're good. But if you try it, the moderates in the House and the Democrats are going to cut a deal. Cut your legs out from under. You don't have the majority to get anything done. That's the reality. Go win some elections. Donald Trump is a realist in this regard. You got to win elections to get stuff done. The conservative movement in D.C. is beginning to lack grace. But more importantly, the leaders of the conservative movement in Washington are giving up on conservatism. They are. They're giving up on conservatism. Conservatism does not have room for government industrial policy at the national level. Conservatism does not have room for massive unionization. Conservatism does not have room for a big government populist strain that thinks the government of the United States can chart the moral trajectory of the country. Conservatism has room for collectivism at local levels where local people can decide that in our community we want this thing and the minority should not be able to bully us through courts to get their thing instead. But conservatism really is about the American people, the individual, with a grounding in the idea that people are inherently sinful, and so we should want constraints and controls on the ability of the sinners to control us, and the best way to do it is to cut the government. And we've been successful at cutting the government. You have all these people say conservatism hasn't conserved anything. Sequestration was the ultimate conservative ideal, and the Republicans forced Barack Obama to accept it in 2013, and it cut real cuts in government at the time. Not cuts in the future growth of government, but real cuts in government, and conservatives did that. Way more effective than a government industrial policy that is executed by bureaucrats who don't have our interests. Mike Johnson has a 2-seat majority. He's a conservative Christian whose worldview is grounded in life and struggle. He's the very first conservative Speaker of the House. And because he has a 2-seat majority, he can't give you what you want, so you want to throw him out. If you're willing to throw out one of your own, the most conservative, Freedom Caucus-loving Speaker of the House, because you're not getting what you want from him in a 2-seat majority where you and he are in the minority, The problem isn't Mike Johnson. It's you and your expectations. Now, that upsets some friends of mine, but y'all, it's a 2-seat majority in the House of Representatives on a good day. On a bad day, it's a 1-seat majority, or the Republicans are actually in the minority. What do you want? Tell you what I want. I want you to go win elections and build the numbers so that the conservative speaker can be a conservative speaker instead of just trying to keep the trains running. You can't even get him to run on time. He's just trying to get him to run. Give him a break. Got a 1-2-seat majority. There's nothing he can accomplish. I assure you, if you were to get rid of him and find the most conservative member of the House that you put up as Speaker of the House, you'd hate him within 5 days as well, because he couldn't get anything done. And what would happen is, when he decided to just grind it all to a halt, the moderates and the Democrats would work together and they would push their whole agenda through, at least Mike Johnson stopping the wokes. It's easy right now for so many of the naysayers to say, look at what's happening, we don't like it. And what they never call your attention to is, look at all the bad stuff that's not happening. It's a harder role to play, but it's one I find myself increasingly pointing out to you. You may not like some of the stuff that's happening, but good Lord, have the imagination to realize all of the bad stuff that's not, that could, if the Democrats really were in charge. Hello there. Welcome. It is Eric Erickson here. The phone number, 877-973-7425. Should you wish to be on the program, I'd be very happy to have you. Let me go to the phones. Oh, no. Be patient with me. I'm sorry. I just looked. I ran long in the last segment, so I could not do justice to your phone call. Should you come on the phone? So let me just tell you this real quick before I move on to other stuff. Melania Trump has returned, and you should see how the media is covering this. I kid you not. The headline of the New York Times is Melania Trump reappears in black. And the majority of the article is about what she was wearing at a log cabin Republicans fundraiser. You know, this isn't getting noticed from evangelicals. You know, that they're a little bit perturbed with Trump's position on abortion lately, evangelicals are, and he's also now doing fundraisers for the Log Cabin Republicans, which is a gay rights group within the GOP. And evangelicals they're raising eyebrows on this. I don't know that it matters much. They'll still support him, but the New York Times way more obsessed with the fact that she's wearing black than anything else. They should be obsessed with she's raising money on the campaign trail under the radar. 10 regional banks have had their credit downgraded. They're going to keep racking up profits. They're going to get sweetheart bailouts if something happens. They're going to be sold to mega banks, perhaps, that are themselves too big to fail. My friends at Swiss America have been sounding the alarm about all of this in their special report, The Secret War on Cash. It's an all-out assault on freedom. You can get it by calling or texting my name to 800-289-2646. With soaring interest rates squeezing the economy, banks on the verge of collapse. Now, I don't know if you've seen the new expectation. The Fed's not going to cut rates in June. Swiss America wants to help you protect your hard-earned assets now. Get their report completely for free, The Secret War on Cash. Call or text my name to 800-289-2646. The all-out war on cash includes digital currency spreading. You can get it for free at 800-289-2646. That's 800-289-2646. Just mention Eric Erickson when you call or text 800-289-2646. Message and data rates may apply. Reach out to Swiss America. Get that free report. Hello there. It is Eric Erickson here. The phone number, 877-973-7425. Before I move on to anything else, I want to go down to Jacksonville, Florida, and take David's phone call. David, welcome to the program. How are you?
Hey, Eric. I listen to you every day and just love the fact that you're conservative. If you see something that conservatives, quote-unquote, are doing, you'll call it out
Thank
in
you.
a second. About this attack that happened on October 7th, as has been said more than once, that was the most horrific attack that could ever happen, and especially some of the things they did to women and children. We don't need to get graphic on it. And you're sitting here going, why would you do that? Is it because you just cut loose crazy people? Probably you did. But why would you let that go by? Well, and I think I get it. That was planned to happen that way, to elicit a response from the Israelis. Because, as you know, Hamas stations troops and weapons and caches of supplies and even fires rockets off, in the middle of civilians. So they knew that the Israelis were going to come after them, and there'd be collateral damage. And the world would blame Israel. They'd forget about the slaughter of Israeli citizens from hang gliders just to make it more graphic, so to speak. And I think this whole thing was just planned. It's gone. It's just kind of, if we do this, then this is what's going to happen. And I think that's the deal. And so you're seeing all these people blaming Israel, when the fact the people that should be blamed is Hamas. Because they knew that Israel was going to attack them when they got done.
So, what's so funny here, David, is they knew that Israel was going to respond, but in their public and private assessments that have leaked out since then, they didn't actually think Israel was going to go for extermination of Hamas. They seem to, and given their actions afterwards, I think their private and public statements kind of corroborate this. They knew Israel was going to respond, and what they hoped to do, and what we now know is true, is they were trying to stop Israel and Saudi Arabia from coming to a peace deal because they were on the verge of a peace deal. And even Saudi Arabia is now saying their intelligence makes it look like Iran wanted Hamas to do this to stop the peace deal from happening, which worked. But Hamas really didn't believe that Israel was going to say, you know what, we're tired of this, we're going to wipe you out. Because generally what happens is they have a month or two skirmish after something, and then they both go back into their borders and leave each other alone until the next time Hamas breaks the ceasefire. And this time Israel is saying no. So, all right, there's a visual here that all of you will appreciate here. When I was 4 years old, before we moved overseas, my parents, we lived in a very old home in rural Louisiana, and it had a rear attic where you could go upstairs to the upstairs bathroom, go into the closet. There was a little bitty door, and you could crawl into the little bitty door into the back attic. Now, my mom and dad went for a walk. And I, as a 4-year-old, ran after them. Now, I'm 4, don't know to look both ways. I'm just running after my parents. Thank God there was no traffic or I would have been a pancake. So I head down towards my parents. My dad sees me. He turns around and chases me back to the house, and I get up to the front porch. He turns around and goes back to my mom. So I go down the front porch and head down the street again. I am Hamas, the little terrorist. My dad is Israel. My dad sees me, turns around, and chases after me. I go back to the front porch. My dad turns around. He goes back to my mom. Third time. I go off the porch. I go down the street. My father turns around. I run back to the house. I turn around. Oh, my father is still running this time. And he's picking up speed, and he's getting close. And the look on his face is pure rage. And I knew, I'm in it. I'm in trouble. So I run upstairs to the bathroom. I lock the door of the bathroom, and I begin entering the closet to go into the attic, and I hear crack. My dad has broken down the bathroom door in a rage. And as I am entering the safety zone of the rear attic, a massive hand comes in and grabs my leg, and I am grabbing everything I possibly can to stay in that attic for my own safety. And wham! With one hand, he's dragging me out, and with one hand, he is unleashing unmitigated hell on me. Of course, I deserved it. The poor bathroom door did not deserve it. But Hamas, like me, was so used to going after Israel. Israel fires back and then turns around and goes back to its business. They just assumed that would happen this time. No. Like my father, Israel pursued them, broke down the door, and stormed in. And they're getting what they deserve. And Hamas was so used to Israel not doing that they assumed they could do this, scuttle the deal with Saudi Arabia, and bygones. There were no bygones. There's been a butt beating by Israel against Hamas, and Israel's not done and intends to eradicate and eliminate the Hamas element. And you can't really blame them. The only people who are blaming them are the people who always blame the Jews. You need that context. You need that understanding of this situation, that Israel humored Hamas for a long time, would attack them, would take out key positions, and Hamas the whole time was stockpiling arms and was getting training from Iran and decided to unleash hell on Israel. They killed 1,700 Jews that day, and they took hundreds hostage. For per capita, if Israel had our population and the same percentage were killed, it would be massively more deadly than what happened to us on 9/11. And when we started bombing Afghanistan and invading Afghanistan and invading Iraq, no one was saying genocide to us. Everyone understood what we were doing. But with Israel, there's always a blame Israel first component. There's always a blame Israel first component. There is a double standard. Israel is always vilified. Israel is always blamed. But then what happens is the left says it's about Zionism. It's never about Zionism, it's about Jews. The students at Columbia who are Jewish, who are being harassed, they're not Zionists, they're Jewish Americans. They don't live in Israel. They're not clamoring for a Jewish state, they're just going to class, and yet they're being targeted. The Jewish professors at Columbia who are being locked off campus, they're not lecturing their classes on Zionism, they're lecturing their classes on the topics of the class, and yet they're being punished. The Jewish students at Harvard and MIT and Yale and Berkeley and Stanford that are being chased off campus and their dormitories attacked and them bullied and badgered in classrooms and cafeterias, they're not Zionists, they're just Americans who happen to be Jewish. And yet, they continue to target the Jews and say it's about Israel, except we know it's not. And the media, particularly terrorist-friendly groups like the Washington Post, give them a pass on this and lie for them. It's shameful to see. 877-973-7425. If you want to be on the phone, Andy, you're up next. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Eric, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm well. I really appreciated your monologue yesterday and part of today about the Charlottesville, Virginia ad and its hypocrisy. And I'm just kind of wondering, as a guy that ran campaigns, don't you think it's kind of political malpractice if they don't produce an ad that sort of mimics that and just
they should.
Substitutes Columbia University with Charlottesville, Virginia, and just basically change a few words and you got the same ad.
Oh, but, look, they absolutely should. And in fact, I think they should say that Joe Biden said he was running because of Charlottesville, Virginia. And now with Jewish students across America harassed, Joe Biden is silent. Yes, I think it's a compelling ad campaign, although I don't know if they actually need to run it because people see it for themselves. People are seeing it. It's wild to me. Now, you've got to understand, and I think it's very important that you do understand that there are a lot of people who are ethnically Jewish, who they're Americans, they're Democrats, they don't identify by their Jewishness any more than someone who's Catholic identifies as their Catholicism. It's just they happen to be Americans and they happen to be on the left. Yes, they happen to be ethnically Jewish, but they don't see it that way. They're progressive Americans and they'll continue to vote Democrat. They don't see it, although a portion of them. And we're talking about an election that's going to be decided by about 50,000 people, and there are a portion of these progressive Democrats who are ethnically Jewish who are being harassed. And they don't get it. They don't support Israel. They hate Benjamin Netanyahu. They've never been to Israel. They're not particularly Jewish in their practices. They don't really even support Passover. They're nominally Jewish in what they do, and yet they're being targeted because they are Jewish, because their last name gives it away. And they're starting to have a wake-up call moment, a lot of them. Not all of them, but a lot of them. You know, it's fascinating in terms of leadership. Ron DeSantis was asked about this and what he would do. He had a press conference yesterday.
Well, first on what's happening in these college campuses, you know, if I were in charge, I would send the Justice Department after those universities, because this is unacceptable to have this type of anti-Semitism where it's not just bad speech. They're really targeting Jewish students. It's a hostile environment and violates the civil rights of those students. And these universities, they just aren't willing to do what needs to be done to ensure.
He's right. They're not willing to do what needs to be done. I can't fathom being harassed on my way to college class or my dorm because of my race, ethnicity, or religious heritage. And yet that's what's happening. College campuses. And again, I just this is so notable. Let me make sure I get this on camera so Philip has something, so Philip can use this one on social media because it'll antagonize all the right people. The Justice Department, I have mentioned, has released a list of colleges that are under investigation for anti-Semitism around the country. And it is a long list of 26 colleges in the United States that are being investigated for anti-Semitism. There is not a single SEC school on the list. There are Big Ten schools. There are ACC schools. There are very few ACC schools, but there are a couple. There are a lot of Ivy League schools. Almost, I think all of the Ivy League is being investigated. Several of the Big Ten schools are being investigated. Not a single SEC school is being investigated. Why is that, do you think? Can you imagine Hamas protesters showing up at the Georgia-Florida game or at the Iron Bowl between Alabama and Auburn? Can you imagine? Or they show up at an LSU tailgate or an Ole Miss tailgate. Can you imagine? It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. And that should tell, frankly, employers like Mark Rowan of Apollo that has been appalled by the Ivy League in his own University of Pennsylvania. That should tell people like Bill Ackman, who went to Harvard, who's been appalled by the Ivy Leagues. You should start hiring SEC kids. They're doing more homework. They're studying harder than the Ivy League. They don't come across as privileged and arrogant, and they're sure as hell not anti-Semitic either. Maybe it's time to stop hiring from the Ivy League and start hiring from the SEC. And even most of the ACC is in the clear, but give up on the Ivy League. Again, the Department of Justice has listed 26 colleges and universities under investigation for anti-Semitism. All of the Ivy League is on the list. Part of the Big Ten is on the list. A couple of ACC schools are on the list. Not a single SEC school is on the list. Maybe if you want to avoid the anti-Semites and the wokes, go for the SEC. And that makes all the right people mad. Now, Americans for Prosperity is making a lot of people mad just by doing the business of the conservative movement around the country. I mentioned them in my op-ed at National Review today. I'm proud to be affiliated with a group that has not wavered in its convictions. They go into states, they educate voters on conservative principles and ideals, and they mobilize those conservatives to take action. You want a good example of this? This past year, Americans for Prosperity actively around the country advanced school choice, including where I am in Georgia, and they helped advance it in Tennessee and South Carolina and Arkansas and Indiana and elsewhere, advancing it and expanding it, and in Louisiana, where they were able to rally conservatives, give them the information on where their legislators aligned on the issue, and march activists to door knocking, to state legislative posts, to local governments, to advocate for school choice. They do these sorts of things around the country. They advocate for conservative solutions. They advocate for families. They advocate for regulatory reform to help small businesses. They have not wavered in their convictions or their principles. They believe that we are all better off with limited government. It's what they support, and that's why I'm glad to support them. You can find out more at americansforprosperity.org/ERICK, americansforprosperity.org/Eric. Go sign up today with them, and they will teach you how to be the best conservative activist you can be. So I will not be here next Friday. I'm not going to be here because I've got a super secret meeting of the vast right-wing conspiracy. I got to go to Las Vegas. Thankfully, at least they're doing it fun in Las Vegas. It's kind of funny. So I was invited to this meeting, and then they decided to cancel the meeting. It's like, I've already paid for my tickets and hotel room, like prepaid to get the discount. So I'm going to go. I'll just have fun. And then they were like, well, let's have the meeting. So now I got to go, and I got to take a suit with me, which I was hoping to have just a casual time. I got to take a suit and give a speech in Las Vegas. I just wanted to go have fun, and now it's actually like legit work. But that's fine. It'll be good. But I bring this up because they have hammered a rail spike into the ground to build a bullet train from Las Vegas to Los Angeles. It's going to cost $12 billion. The government of the United States appropriated some money to get this off the ground, but this is actually going to be a private rail company. Brightline is the parent company. It's got a high-speed rail train between Miami and Orlando, and they're going to lay 218 miles of new track along the interstate of I-15 to go from Las Vegas and Rancho Cucamonga, California, and then link to a commuter rail there to get into downtown L.A. Now, I'm intrigued by this because it's a private company. Yes, it's gotten government subsidies, and no, I don't think it should, but it's going to be interesting to see. So here's the reality is a lot of people drive from California to Las Vegas. When they get to Las Vegas, they just stay in the hotels. So if a private company is willing to try this out, I'm not going to mock them. They shouldn't have gotten government subsidy, but let's see how it goes.